It's time to prune our rose bushes, and we want to give you the tips that helped us get our rose bushes to be really healthy. And so I'm going to talk through when you know it's time to prune, what stalks to cut out, and how to know where to cut on the bush. So let's dive in, okay? The first thing you need to know is your whole goal in pruning your rose bush is to help it be healthy. That's why we prune it. If we never touched the rose bush, yes, it would bloom. It would continue to get taller, it would bloom, and it would turn into a crazy mess. And most likely, especially here in our area, in the Seattle area where there's a lot of moisture, it would get a lot of disease. So we prune it because we're helping it to be healthier. So I know it can feel a little drastic. I know the first time that I cut it back in the way that I was like learning how to do it, it felt like I was cutting so much off. And I thought, this thing is never gonna survive. And amazingly, it bloomed the biggest, most beautiful blooms. You'll see when we get done with this bush, it's gonna be way smaller. And this summer, the blooms will be up to here, so tall, way taller than I can reach the top of them some years. So let's start with, when should you start pruning? Here in our area right now, it's the beginning of March. And come here, babe, let's show them. So you can look at the leaf buds. They're starting to open here. These have already started to open up, which tells us, oh man, it is time to prune if our leaves are doing that. But this right here, see this bud right here? That is just beginning to swell. That is what you're looking for. If you see this on your rose bush, most likely you're past the last frost. Like, we might get a few nights coming up that'll be in the 30-degree range, but we won't really get another deep frost. So if your rose bushes have those opening little buds where it's like starting to swell, that means you can start pruning your rose bush. The first thing that we do when we prune ours is we actually look for the stalks that are dead. The easiest thing to do is to get anything that's dead out of the way so that you can see what's healthy, what's looking good. So, okay, come in here, babe. Let's see. Okay, this stalk right here is looking pretty gnarly and not as happy. And so I'm gonna take this one out first, and I'm gonna go all the way down here to the base. And I have my nice strong clippers. Okay, so get the dead thing out of there, okay? Now, if you compost, don't put your rose branches into your compost. They take a really, really long time to compost. And if by chance your roses had any disease, you're putting that into your compost bin. So don't do it. Put it in your yard waste, or just get rid of it in your trash, okay? Now, the next thing that we're looking for is we want to find, now this is a big rose bush and very old and established. So our goal is to have like 6 to 7 main canes. That's what we want to end up with. So before we do anything with bringing the height down, we're gonna choose which of these canes are we actually going to keep. And come here, babe, let's show them. So this right here, you can see the difference between, this is one of the older, more established canes. Here's one of the new ones that's like nice and fresh. This is really the goal, is that we want to take out any diseased canes, which we already got that one out. Then we're looking at which canes are we going to keep. Part of how we make that decision is if there are any of these canes that are growing up on yours and they are crossing another cane and they're rubbing on it, you want to take that out, because what ends up happening is they end up hurting each other. And so we don't want them to be touching each other. We want the canes to be coming out like this, and they all have their own space to grow, which allows really good circulation. It helps to keep the disease away. And we don't want them to be scraping on each other where it could cause more harm. So this one right here is scraping on one of the other ones. Even though it's a young buddy, we want it out of there because it's not making for a very open rose bush. So we're gonna get that one out. Okay, now let's look at these other ones. we have this nice one right here. I really like this one because it's new and fresh and it's growing out this direction. So we're gonna keep that one. These two are actually looking pretty good. So we'll come back and look at that in a minute. So right there we have 3. Then we have this one right here. It's older, but it's going in a really nice direction. It's not rubbing on anything down here, so I'm okay with that. This one right here, this would be number 5. This one is also growing in a nice direction, not rubbing on anything. And then we have these back here, 6 and 7. So see how they all have their own space to grow? I like that. We're gonna keep it just like that. This little dead buddy, let's get that out of there. So now when we look at this part of our rose bush, it's all nice and open, and we're happy with the way that's growing. So now that we're happy with how many canes we have, we're gonna work on bringing it down in height. Yours could be way, way taller. It might be a little bit shorter, but the thing to keep in mind is that you want to only take off about 1/3 of the height. So if we cut this plant into 3 sections, we don't want to go down much further than here as we bring the height down in it. So stand back, look at your rose bush and be like, okay, if I cut it into thirds, where would be about 1/3? And that rule goes for like really any shrub or tree that you're cutting down. You don't want to take off more than 1/3 of it because it is so stressful to the plant when you're like hacking off too much. So for this one, let's look at this cane right here. I'm actually going to come down here and I'm going to make the cut right here. And the reason why I'm going to do it right here is because see this little tiny bud right there? That's going to be a new cane, which is going to send out growth this direction, which is great because that's going away from the middle of the plant. If I were to cut it right here, this cane is going to start growing this direction, and then all of a sudden it's going to be crossing with other stuff up here. So I'm going to go right down here and cut it right above that bud, okay? Take that out of there. This right here, I'm not a fan of how that is growing. So I'm actually going to cut it back here because we don't want any of our branches to be growing around each other where it could be rubbing, and that's so awkward that it was growing this way. So amazingly, there will probably be some growth that comes out right there. And here's the cool thing about roses is even though you're looking at it and you're thinking, oh my goodness, I'm cutting off so much, all of this new growth is actually where the rose is going to bloom. It's all of this new space that puts on the rose buds. It isn't any of the old growth right here where the rosebud comes out. It's the new part where it comes out. So I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna clean up a little bit more because Aaron is so good at making all the cuts. I might even just trade and have him do more of the cuts.
We're gonna start with this stalk right here, and I'm gonna go ahead and just nip this guy off because he's coming across into the plant. We kind of want stuff to go out of the plant. So I'm just gonna get rid of it just to get it out of the way. I may take this down further. I'll go right there, just above that growth, so he'll send all the energy to that growth. And then these are really, sometimes you have to use bigger loppers. We'll look at this guy here. I'm just gonna take this guy off altogether because he's kind of coming across the plant. Nothing will come out there because there is no bud at the notch. I'm gonna go above this bud.
So you're always looking for the bud before you cut.
And sometimes it just looks like a little eye on the.
And so since even though it's down there a little bit lower, you're gonna cut right above that.
It's lower.
Because that's gonna give it fresh growth.
It will.
And get you stuck on there.
I'm totally stuck, okay? Okay, we'll start with this guy. I'm gonna nip this off because this is just dead. Sometimes that can start to rot.
So if there's a spot that is just totally died, which it looks
you can
really
see
light.
So how it's starting to rot on that side.
Yeah.
If that continues down into the cane, so if you can, we'll see if it's possible for us to get a nice clean cut here. where I don't want to go into the notch, but that's a cleaner cut. Okay, so this fresh cane has this bud coming out this way, and it's gonna go across the plant, which is not gonna be, you kind of want to keep the center of it open to let air flow. So there's a notch here where the old leaf is. I'm just gonna clip that old leaf off because it's just dead. Now you can see at that notch where the leaf came out, there's a bud, and I'm gonna go just above it, like that. And that way it's gonna send it out this way. Even though it's quite a bit lower, it will.
Yeah, and now you can see that there's like a dead spot right here.
So we're gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna do it at an angle so the water doesn't sit on top. And that's already dead cane, which has some growth up here, and sometimes it's hard to make yourself do it, but in this case there'll still be enough of the plant because we can see there's a bud coming out right here. It's heading in the direction we want it to, which is out from the middle of the plant. So I'm gonna actually go down to there, and it will send up some nice new growth, even though it's a bit lower than the rest of our plant.
But look at how nice and clean it is. It's all cleaned up, all trimmed out. Now, one thing to remember is you don't want any of those dead rose leaves sitting around the base of it, which I know it's hard to tell in the video because we have wood chips and stuff around here. But when you're done pruning, just work around the bush and clean up all of the leaves and such that have fallen so that those can go into your yard waste. You don't want to leave them around the plant because as they decay at the base of it, they can actually just get the disease, or if you had black spot, it can go right back up into the plant if it's sitting down at the base. Okay, we have it all cleaned up now. It's all fresh and ready to grow this season. You'll have to stick around this summer when this rosebush is way tall and blooming. Its big, huge blooms. We'll be sure to show you. But quick disclaimer. This style of trimming is not for a climbing rose. Don't trim your climbing rose like this. Or if you have like an English bush style tea rose, that's a different style of rose. This trimming method is for if you have the rose that has like canes. And here's what I want you to know. Don't be afraid that you're going to totally kill and ruin your rose. As long as you leave a few canes, it's going to make it. This rosebush we actually uncovered when we first bought our house and we were redoing the landscaping on the other side of the house. We found these rose bushes buried underneath this hedge. They were so sad. I couldn't get them to do anything. I ripped them out of the ground. I was gonna throw them into the compost bin, and guess what? We planted them here. We thought, let's give them one last chance, and they have turned into the most glorious rose bush. So don't give up on your rose. Give it a fresh trim. Leave at least a few stalks. Even if they look sad, leave a few stalks there and see what it does with just a fresh trim this season. And we look forward to seeing what your rose blooms this year.